season, we're invited to pay attention, to truly see others and to see interconnected reality of our relationships. The two themes of the study are awakening and action. During the pandemic, CCPC was spurred to act when we all saw on the news George Floyd being murdered by a police officer. In this study in Louisville, Kentucky, the congregation was spurred to act when Breonna Taylor, a young Black medical worker, was killed by police in a terribly botched effort to serve a warrant. In that community, those acts called attention to injustices. We experienced demonstrations in Dallas that called for justice, as did they in Louisville for Breonna Taylor's murder. We could not change the outcome, but as a nation, we woke up and paid attention. In this study, we're called to act and to see and to act. Let's open with a word of prayer. Dear God, we pray for those who are victims of injustices of all kinds. Father God, we ask you to move our hearts to notice injustice and cause us to action. Amen. Okay, we're going to start off. This has short videos with it. So this is the introductory video.
Hello, and welcome to our Bible study on the book of Exodus. My name is Tyler Mayfield, and I teach Old Testament at Louisville Presbyterian Theological Seminary.
And my name's Mary Alice Birdwhistle. I am the pastor of Highland Baptist Church here in Louisville, Kentucky. We are so glad that you have joined us as we explore our book called Hard and Holy Work, a Lenten Journey Through the Book of Exodus.
In 1958, a Trappist monk named Thomas Merton was visiting downtown Louisville, Kentucky, when he was overcome with this spiritual epiphany. He was looking around this bustling downtown area when he felt a sense that everyone belonged to God and to each other. They were all walking around, he said, shining like the sun. Today, there's actually a historical marker at this place in downtown Louisville that commemorates Merton's epiphany. And people from around the world come to visit this ordinary and extraordinary place.
So just a few blocks away from where Thomas Merton had this epiphany is another significant site in our city. It is a place that we now call Injustice Square, and it was named that after protests for justice for Breonna Taylor, the young medical worker who was wrongfully killed in our city just a few years ago. This space has since become a gathering spot for lots of local protests and justice movements. And there's a historical site there as well, marking the significance of what we believe is another sacred space.
So you might think, what in the world do these 2 points in downtown Louisville, Kentucky have to do with one another? But we actually think that there is a direct relationship between this space of spiritual awakening for Thomas Merton and this place of social justice and social action for Breonna Taylor. There's something about Merton's invitation to pay attention to where God is working in our cities that calls us to then march and to protest, to speak up for the work of liberation in a place like Injustice Square.
We are actually filming this video today from Highland Baptist Church in Louisville, just a couple miles from downtown where these sites are. And this is another sacred space to us. These stone walls have carried the hopes and dreams of so many folks who have worked for justice and liberation in our city. However, we are also mindful that we often feel like we don't know the next step to take to work for justice. We don't know how to move from spiritual awakening to taking steps for social justice and liberation. And sometimes in an effort to not go the wrong way in justice work, we feel like we get stuck and we end up going no way at all.
We're not alone in this feeling of being stuck. Time and time again, the Israelites get stuck as they wander in the wilderness, and they really have no idea where they're going or what they're going to do next. Their journey with God then can become for us an inspiration during this season of Lent.
So that's what brings us here today. As we begin this season of Lent together, we want to seek to move through these two interconnected practices of the spiritual life. Awakening, paying attention to where God is and how God is at work in the world around us, and then acting, working for justice and liberation. And so we hope you will join us this Lent in this hard and holy work.
One of the important aspects of this biblical study is actually at the end of each chapter, where we offer for you an opportunity to reflect and to respond on the readings that you've done that week. We actually have 3 sections there at the end of the chapter. At first, you'll see paying attention, which is a set of questions for self-reflection that you can use on your own in an individual setting. We also have there at the end of the chapter a set of questions called Sharing Together, where we ask you, if you're doing this hard and holy work in a group setting, that you turn to your neighbor and your friend and your fellow church member or community member, and you share with each other your reflections about this work. And then finally, a 3rd section at the end of the chapter called Taking Action, where we suggest some actions, some concrete action steps that you can take in the week of Lent that you're reading the material.
So the reality is that having the type of conversations that we want to have in this book study can make us uncomfortable. But isn't that how we grow? Isn't that how we change and are transformed into the people that God is inviting us to be, by allowing ourselves to get uncomfortable? Perhaps the journey of faith, if it's ever going to stretch us or move us beyond our imaginations, is going to be an uncomfortable one. So we hope that you will join us in what we call an unsettling but hard and holy journey.
So again, we hope you will join us in this discomfort, in this holy work, this Lenten season. We hope you will find a group to journey alongside you in this work, because none of us are meant to do this work alone. Join us.
Rather interesting spelling.
Yeah.
They might just be like the auto-generated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
They mention in here about Thomas Merton and his epiphany. Have any of you ever felt like you've had an epiphany? On his, they put up a marker. But have we, any of you, had something that was so changing that you would call it an epiphany?
I have.
Okay.
One time I was in college and I was just walking back from the center of campus to my sorority house. And I was at the University of Florida, where all the buildings are just this amazing red brick. And the sky was just this gorgeous blue, and all the palm trees were this beautiful shade of green. And I was just inundated by God's colors. And I just kind of broke into prayer and prayed the whole walk, and just taking in all of that beauty and God's creation around me. And I still feel that day. So I think that was an epiphany for me.
Any other epiphanies?
When I was in grade school,
When I was in grade school, we lived out in West Texas in McCamey, which is the far end of nowhere. I think they've got 1,300 people there now, and it's grown. But we went to see the McDonald Observatory because Dad knew a guy. And I got to look at Saturn through the telescope. And I realized it's a big place. It's a really big place. And it just
It
was
is amazing to see
it's
that.
wonder to see something like that and since then I've seen hobbyist telescopes, but nothing like looking through the big one.
That's true. Anyone else? Well, I had one that I don't know that I would have classified it as an epiphany, but I had an experience when I was principal that I felt like was directly from God. I had some children in my school their mother was in prison. The director of student services called me one day and asked me if I would take them. They came with no records, nothing. They were living with family members while Mom was in prison. And something about these children touched my heart tremendously. They were being verbally mistreated in the home where they were staying. And they just were not getting any support whatsoever. But we got them into special education. They all qualified as emotionally disturbed, and even got the little one, the youngest one, in school. I didn't know how old he was, so he hadn't been in school. And when we got all of them, they'd been in school, they'd been out of school for 6 months. So they were very far behind. And I guess at the end of the first year that we had them, the sister, and I'm not sure how this sister was connected. There were 10 people living in the house. And so they were losing their lease on the house. And they couldn't find any place that would take 10 people. So they were going to have to give up the 3 Cooper children, to Child Protective Services, to the foster care system. And something in me would just not turn loose of that. The bottom line is that I called our community, African-American community liaison person and said, are there any resources in the community for these children? And she said, sadly, they're not. So I called Presbyterian Children's Home and talked to a very nice man who said, we've got a spot for all 3 of them in the Itasca campus. So I wrote to Mom, and she wrote back, and she was very upset that the people, the dad of one of the children, would not keep the kids. But she agreed that that might be the best thing for them. So with her permission, the last day that they had to move out of the house, they left the children on the doorstep at the school with their 3 trash bags of belongings. and we took them down to Itasca. It's a great, we should be very proud of Presbyterian Children's Home and Services. They did a great job. They were so open and, invited us to come down and see them, invited us to take them home with us, which we did. We had them almost every other weekend. At that time, I was taking care of my parents every other weekend with my sister on the alternating one. So I would try to go down and get the kids on the weekend. In retrospect, I wish that we had taken them ourselves, but I was overwhelmed at the moment by responsibilities. Anyway, God just would not turn loose of me until I figured out, or he sent me away to take care of them. That was my epiphany. And I saw my epiphany on Sunday. The youngest, yes. Xavier came to see us Sunday. We had the nicest visit with him, and he is a successful young man. He's a chiropractor. He graduated from Logan University with a doctorate, and
That's amazing.
it is amazing. Richard and I talked after he left, and he said, Xavier could be the poster boy for resilience. I mean, he really is. The other two are not as successful. But anyway, he said he was bringing them all back next Sunday afternoon, including his mother, whom I have never met. I have talked to her a couple of times. She called me from prison one time, and we wrote back and forth some. But anyway, we're anxious for next Sunday. But that is my epiphany. And I don't know if it qualifies as an epiphany, but it certainly seems.
It definitely qualifies as an epiphany.
So I think that we God reaching into our world and getting our attention. I think it's every day. It can be every day. There are the big ones, and we think of, and those are huge, 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 life-changing, life-shaping. But I think to be willing to have our eyes open to epiphanies that may be every day, just little connections, or it's the epiphany is the light, it's like a revelation, a pulling back of the veil. And so, yeah, I think not putting it on a high pedestal. The holy is right here with us. Yeah.
On Ash Wednesday, we begin to, with the reminder that we are dust and we will return to dust. That's kind of sobering for us to think about. We don't often like to think about our own mortality. Ash Wednesday calls us to realize that precious life entrusted to us is not only precious, but fragile. Ash Wednesday challenges us to sit in discomfort of these hard and holy truths and pushes us to the wilderness of Lent. We'll be studying the book of Exodus. Exodus is a liberating story and was feared by certain oppressors, such as enslavers, who attempted to quell the reading of those stories among their enslaved people. There was a slave Bible, it was called Slave Bible, was created in 1807 by British missionaries, of all things. And it was for specific use for enslaved Africans. It omitted several parts. It For instance, Galatians 3:28, when it says there's no longer slave or free, for all are one in Christ Jesus. It deleted the entire book of Revelation because, there's that new heaven and new earth thing. And then they also eliminated a large part of Exodus. From chapters 1 through 18, they just cut it out. Can you think of some reasons why they might have cut those out?
Because they rose up and left.
They got out of slavery, yes. And they certainly didn't want them getting ideas like that. True. Right.
Let them repeat.
Did-
Yeah.
Did you have something?
No, just repeat that it was, that they couldn't read or write, so even. yeah.
Right, they couldn't read or write. It was actually at one point, it was against the law to teach slaves to read, because that would be dangerous. They could
And-
find out all sorts of things.
Education's a terrible.
Education is a terribly
Yeah.
revolutionary thing.
And Sandra was saying, that they had the songs about it. I mean, they had the oral storytelling. They would, yeah.
Yeah, they must have certainly learned that, because go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land, tell old Pharaoh to let my people go.
Yeah.
So they certainly had the stories. What about our looking at the justice piece of this? One that they were talking about where Breonna Taylor was killed. We talked about George Floyd. There was Ahmaud Arbery. All of those seem to happen just boom, boom, boom. And
Police officer killed accidentally, supposedly. What's his name?
Get to speak out.
Oh, I don't know.
I'm
his
sorry,
name.
what, Barbara?
Yeah, that's the same one I'm talking about.
Oh, that was, I'll tell you his name in a second.
Emmett Till?
No, it's Rodriguez. He-
I was working at Dallas Valley Authority when that happened.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of his name. It'll come to me, I think, in a bit. Yes, where a 12-year-old boy was shot by a police officer. He actually put a gun to his head like Russian roulette, and it went off.
You said that,
Oh, here it is.
or someone said they just happened, boom, boom, boom. These things have been happening all along. We just haven't heard about them.
Well, and another factor in that, it's not just that we haven't heard about them, but people have they have phones with cameras on them. And when they see those injustices, they record it. So we know more about it. You're right, they have been going on for years and years. We just weren't aware of it.
We have a Native American population also.
Pardon me?
The Native American population, that's the same type of
Oh, right,
uh,
definitely,
injustice.
definitely through the years. That's one of our darkest parts of our history.
Wait a second.
The slave Bible that you were talking about, 1807, that kind of clicked in my mind. And it's like, that was, so I looked up William Wilberforce and the abolition of the slave trade in Britain was 1807.
Mm.
So I don't know if this thing was written just big, I mean, it's like the Ku Klux Klan coming up, when, I don't know. Interesting time frame there.
Yes,
And can you imagine taking, Old Testament, you can kind of justify, okay, well, yeah, it's
we-
Old Testament, blah, blah, blah. You really can't, but okay, but to take out Galatians, and I wonder how much he took out of what Jesus said. That just goes all over me.
yeah, those were
that's
just
like-
a few things that
Yeah,
they mentioned.
yeah.
I'm sure there were a lot of other places, but certainly they didn't want slaves getting any idea about freedom. It was.
Well, there's been all sorts of, out here. There's been all sorts of stuff. Marguerite Malcolm told me about that her parents met at the Carlisle Indian School. And my grandmother was adamant about always wearing a hat and carrying a parasol because she didn't want to get dark and get sent to Indian school. You know, yeah, she was half. And stuff like that, we don't realize what a big deal that is. They cut their hair and they couldn't use their Indian names. They got assigned names whenever it happened. And that was 2 generations back for me.
Yeah, they didn't really start closing down those Indian schools until about 50s, 60s.
Yeah, this is 60s, early 70s.
So
Okay.
that's not such ancient history for those of us in this class.
Yeah, I just finished a book called This Tender End.
Yes.
William K. Kruger, takes place in 1902, about these young boys who were sent to an Indian school in Minnesota. And the slogan of the school was "Kill the Indians, save the man." And like Barbara said, they changed, speak their language. They were severely mistreated, depending on who the people in charge were. And it was pretty eye-opening reading for me. Excellent, excellent book. But
I've read that book too.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Ordinary
was the
Grace,
book I was
another
thinking of when Barbara was speaking. The mic's cutting in and out a little bit with Susan there.
You didn't understand what she said?
I heard most of it because that was
Okay.
the same book I was thinking of when Barbara was speaking, but there was parts of it that cut in and out.
Okay. Yeah, really close to your mouth. And it's hard for us to do. Getting back to the injustice part, they talked a bit about privilege. And I know that when we were talking about in the George Floyd era, we talked a good bit about privilege, and it made people feel very uncomfortable because they weren't privileged. How do we look at that privilege? I never thought of myself as being privileged, but just by the fact that I'm white gives me privilege.
Just think of all the people that are passing. All the people that are passing.
Well,
It's still going on.
well, yeah. Find those on the DNA when you look at the DNA.
When I was in rehab, you know, I had to pass a test to do a stand-up shower. Okay. Yes, yes. And the person that came to observe was Black. I don't know what, you know, whether she was from Guyana or where. And she said, "You have such beautiful skin." And I said, "No one has ever told me that. I think I have the blotchiest white," but this woman, and she was gorgeous. I mean, she had the most beautiful skin. You know what I'm saying? And it was just, it totally floored me. I mean, I was like, this old thing? Oh, my Lord. Anyway, it was just, wow. Yeah. To be, that's what I just wondered if, how much of that is her wishing that she was white. And, you know, we didn't have that conversation, but anyway, yeah. I never would have thought that you know,
Right,
in my wildest dreams. Yeah.
that they would envy your white skin.
Yeah. Well, and mine.
The idea of showering in front of someone at our age is not a very appealing thing for either party.
Karen,
Yeah,
Ellen reminded me of
You
something.
have to do it loud enough.
loud.
Ellen reminded me of something when Bob's mom was very ill and dying. We had a company that came 24/7 and stayed with her. And they worked shifts. There was this most wonderful Black lady. She was from Zimbabwe, I believe, or Zambia. She was from Zambia because Bob sent some things to her family for her. She told us that she was so happy to be with Bob and Mary Mowdy. She sat at the table with them and she ate dinner with them. And if she cooked too much, they called us and we went over and the 5 of us had dinner together. She used whatever restroom she wanted to use. When she was at the family before Bob and Mary, and we're talking about Mary died in 2008, okay? So we're talking the 21st century here. She was not allowed to use the same restroom, particular restroom she had to use when she worked at these people's houses, and she could take meals with, cooked for them, fed them after she cooked up in 2008. And she was thrilled to be with Bob and Mary. And it was maybe that's my epiphany, Ellen, to see her and what she did and how good my in-laws were to her. And just because that's who they were and because that's who she was. I mean, she took care of them. She came to church when they died. When Mary died, she was with us at our table with our group during her ceremony. She was a wonderful woman. Unfortunately, she was Black. That was the only that I know of that
Right.
led to the problems that she
The
had
only
to deal
detriment
with.
for her was,
Yeah.
was the color of her skin.
And she ended up going back to Zambia after Mary passed away. She stayed a while with Bob, but then she went back to Zambia. And of course, I have some of her recipes, but I haven't talked to her since.
How do
It's
we?
sad that you have to say that your in-laws were so good for treating someone humanely, you know?
Yes.
That, I mean,
Yes.
not that your in-laws aren't so good, I'm sure they are, but I'm just saying that they were just treating her in a humane way. Not like, the other people were not, I guess, is what my point is. And that shouldn't be an outlier. That should just be that we treat people humanely because they are humans.
How do we change these things? This has been going on for,
It's systemic.
yes. How do we get past that? Not only us personally, but as a nation of people we certainly have a wide variety of people. I mean, we are a nation of immigrants. We have people from everywhere. And yet,
We were in BJ's last night and we were so the minority. And I thought I'm so glad that Dallas is so multicultural now. Maybe we can learn. And to me, part of it is that our kids will teach us because they will have friends that cross all lines. But yeah, I've been really convicted by the more I listen to Jesus, more I listen to Jesus' teachings. And so Sunday, we had the update on the implementation team in the Sunday school hour on the Matthew 25 deal, which is, in as much as you have done it to the least of these, you've done it to me, Jesus says. And so they're having that, and we had a trouble with Zoom because we got it on the wrong, there was a mix up in the instruction and all this. And so I was headed up here to check out the Zoom, and I drive by and there is a homeless man across the street on the ground. And I'm thinking, was that guy asleep? And I come into the parking lot and I think, if we're a Matthew 25 church, I need to go check on him. And so I went over and I didn't solve the Zoom problem. And he had fallen and had ripped his skin and was bleeding. And you know, and so I was with him there, and he you know, I mean, he was had whatever kind of dementia or whatever, you know, didn't necessarily always make sense. And so I was there trying to help him, and another car pulled up, and the guy was a paramedic. And
Oh,
and so, you know, through all the discussion that came out. And anyway, so we were helping him, and ends up that he called the ambulance and I went on. But, you know, it's convicting.
it is.
And he's right across the street. And Matthew 25 is being talked about in 3:12, 3:14. So
We're in the awakening stage.
we're in the awakening. Yeah, is what Susan said.
But Ellen was called to action,
Yeah.
and we had blessing bags.
Just gonna say, the
Mhm.
blessing bags for that.
Yes.
think we saw him.
Oh.
We drove up to church.
Yeah.
And I thought it was a teenager with his backpack sitting there. We
Yeah.
drove on.
Yeah. So Ann McCulley said that she saw him too, and thought it was a teenager with his backpack. Yeah. He had on a hood, and yeah. So yeah. Y'all get this now.
And it's hard to determine ages of homeless people if they've been out on the street long, because it ages you tremendously. But in this study, we're being called to notice marginalized people and listen to marginalized voices in our society. Stories in the Bible should challenge, inspire, and beckon us to pay attention to what's happening in the world around us. How do these stories remind us of who we are as a people of God, wandering through the wilderness of this moment, seeking to find our way to liberation and freedom? How do these stories speak to us and our privilege? We have a few. The way this book is set up, we're right at the end of the introduction. The way it's set up is that you have at the end of each chapter, you have Lenten practices, and for each day of the week, they give you questions, thoughts that will make you perhaps uncomfortable enough to change. And then the discussion of sharing together and taking actions. So I think that we could spend a little bit of time on that first group of discussion questions for today. So does somebody, do you online, someone have the book so that they can get the chapter? Okay, it's on page 11 in your book, student books. That's all we have is a student book. Yes, that's what I was discussing with Ellen. I'll teach next week. I've already studied the first chapter, but were you going to teach it?
Oh, I was.
Okay,
The first chapter or the second chapter? Next week, so she's teaching.
I'll
next week.
teach next week, so you can, unless you're just dying to
No,
teach it
that's
next
good.
week.
Karen, did
Okay.
you send questions out? to-
They are in the book.
Right, okay.
Do you have a book?
No,
Okay, if Cindy has a book, and so she can read the questions to you.
I think we got through the good questions. We're good.
All right,
I wasn't
if we'll come back together.
And then to know that that's the year
You want us?
I know y'all are having a great discussion over there,
She's calling
and
me
it's
back.
fine.
Yeah.
Does anyone have things to share from their group discussion?
Cindy, do you want to share what you shared? I thought it was very well said.
A part about China or all of it?
Well, the human trafficking
Okay.
with kids.
So one of the kind of parallels that I saw with this book where it talks about the slave Bible, and their Bible was censored. They were only told what people wanted them to hear. And I see a lot of that, on the news with human trafficking, where, people, these traffickers will go into these impoverished countries, and they'll basically get the child, from whether they're purchased or just given to these traffickers. The parents are told that they're going to give their child a better way of life. They're going to bring them to the United States or whatever country that's not, struggling like they are. And then they're basically, the parents are, the information censored. So the parents don't realize that their child is being forced into trafficking. And then those kids are enslaved and, basically have no way out. So really, human trafficking in my mind is modern day slavery. And, I guess it bothers me that there's not more about that on television. Like I said, I'm a humanitarian. I feel for George Floyd's, the way he was murdered and everything, but also the children, I think, should be our biggest concern today, is that we need to, expose this trafficking. It's not talked about like racism. It really isn't, but it is trafficking. And these children come from all walks of life. They're all different colors and religions. And, that's, to me, that's one of the biggest problems that we're facing today in slavery.
Okay, good point. Anyone else? Yeah, Anne, here, I'll get. Oh, there it is.
I think to reinforce what Cindy's saying, we heard throughout TRUSA, we had a seminar on that, and yeah, they're coming a lot from foreign countries, but they're coming a lot from just around here. And I think the thing that was most shocking to me was the amount of human trafficking. They said, you go in any hotel, go down to Campbell and Central, any hotel there, and if you know what to look for, you're going to see a bunch of human trafficking going on. And I was just, what? But it's not like it's off in some foreign place. It is right here in our neighborhoods. So, and it's a lot of teenagers and others, young women, local, better.
In
Yeah.
Dallas.
What did you say?
Yeah, it is.
There's a ton of it in the garment industry in Dallas.
Well,
People.
I think they're probably
in-
everywhere.
Yeah, but that's a one particular industry that is really notable for it.
I see. Well, I know there was recently, there was a teenage girl that was taken from American Airlines Center, and they said she was in a Dallas hotel, and, that people saw her and they had to know, and nobody reported it. Anyway, they got their daughter back eventually.
Well, in Plano as well.
Pardon me?
In Plano as well, that house that was
Yes.
raided.
And that is a form of
Also,
slavery.
can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So also, there were at least 2 Amber Alerts this week with young children. One was 12, an African American, and they found her in a hotel. And then the other girl, the one from Livingston, Texas, Audrey, she ended up, they found her dead today. So it's just, you know, these young girls are being preyed upon. Now, the one that was found in the hotel, you know, thankfully she was okay, but there was something, she had some computer connection with this
Person.
this person that was after her. And you're right, the trafficking does, it is here too. It's not like it's not here, but they prey on those that are weak and those that are lonely. And you know, that's the sad part of it is these young children, and I say children because it can be boys too. It is a epidemic in this country. And I think that, you know, that needs to be a big focus. And I think that should be part of the push for being humanitarian and, you know, inclusive, is trying to find ways to stop this, this human trafficking. And, you know, I think they said Denton County, Texas is one of the worst spots in the entire nation, if you can believe that.
No, I thought Denton was such a great place to live.
I like the courthouse thing.
Yeah.
When there's big sporting events, they
Yes.
bring people
Mhm.
Yeah, I think Corinne told me, it's like when there's big sporting events, they bring people in to be, you know, to be with someone for the night or whatever. Yeah. But I was telling that, you know, when I did the grand jury, there was one thing, you know, that was kind of an epiphany, I guess, for me, you know, just seeing how the system works, and it's not all bad. But there was, and I think I've said before in here, when we had some prostitution cases, and you know, where it's like getting help for this you know, the really bad people are the ones that are doing the trafficking. But the prostitute, they said, it's like, you know, it's like you don't grow up as a little girl thinking, oh, I'm going to grow up to be a prostitute. You know, there's something that's happened in your life that gets you there. And so they would work with these people to help the underlying conditions and help, you know, get them back. Yeah. So
Well, I was telling the group when we were talking about human trafficking that there's a wonderful organization. It's part of the Tim Tebow Foundation that you know, his wife, she has a real heart for this, and she got part of the organization to do all these great things to fight human trafficking. They do prevention, training, and teaching to prevent the cycle. They do rescue missions, and then they do post work where they go through all sorts of physical, mental, emotional support for those who've been rescued, the victims from human trafficking, and even set up homes with people who, I mean, lots of the victims together so they don't feel judged by others, and they allow them to stay there 100% until their persecutors are safely in prison and they feel safe to leave. And I just put the website to it on the chat for the Zoom, as we were talking about it in our Zoom group. So if anyone was interested in looking into that, basically timtebowfoundation.org/ministry/anti-human trafficking. So anyone who's interested in seeing and learning more about that and different ways to help. So maybe Catherine can share that with the people in person.
Thank you, Heather, for sharing that.
Anything we can do to help, right?
Yes, yes. Anything else that we'd like to talk about from our groups? Okay. We have Joyce and concerns.
Yes.